You cannot go through life doing okay without knowing anything about money. What seems like common sense to everybody is how can I get rich the fastest? That's the cause of every financial failure.
My guest is Morgan Housel, best-selling author to the tune of millions and one of the smartest thinkers on the psychology of money. He has spent his career finding the financial lies we tell ourselves and getting us to the truth on how to become really wealthy. I'm so excited for this episode. I think you're going to be too.
Nobody's thinking about you as much as you are. And that goes for your ugly stuff, for your insecurities, and what you might think other people will really admire you for. And so it's easy to tell ourselves, if I had this and that and this house and this car and these clothes, other people would give me a level of respect and admiration that they're not right now.
What are the habits of rich people versus poor people?
It's a combination of obsession and long-term thinking. They wake up thinking about their business. They go to bed thinking about their business. They've been doing the same thing for 30 years.
What have you found is the number one lie or untruth we are told about money?
You don't need intelligence and connections and education and experience to do well. All you need is
First, I want to read a story from your new book, which I'm obsessed with. The story goes like this. A man notices his coworker drinking a latte, and he asks, "How often do you drink lattes?" "Every day," says the coworker. "Wow, every day for 30 years of your professional career," says the man. "That's so much money." Proceeds to talk about how much money that would be. "It's like more than enough to buy a Ferrari." The coworker looks puzzled. "Do you buy lattes?" she asks the man. "No," he says. "So where's your Ferrari?" And I love this story because your book is about saving in many ways and how to spend properly, just like your other book is about the psychology of money, but it's not fucking boring advice about how to not buy $5 lattes.
I think so much of financial advice and financial media is based off of two things. A, lectures, and B, formulas. So let me give you a lecture to tell you that what you're doing is wrong, and let me give you a formula for how to fix it. And nobody is interested in that. Nobody's interested in being told that they're living a wrong life, and nobody wants a formula that is indistinguishable from like Algebra 1 in high school kind of thing. They don't want that. What people want is advice on how you can be yourself and be independent and live a life that is true to yourself. And to learn about that, tell them a story about somebody else and how they've done it wrong or how they've done it right. I think that's what's sorely lacking in all financial education. Finance is one of very few topics that affects everybody. No matter who you are, where you're from, money will impact your life. Health is the other one. And because of that, like, people have an obligation to learn about this stuff. You can go through life just fine knowing nothing about chemistry and have a great life. You cannot go through life doing okay without knowing anything about money. It's so important, but the way that it tends to be taught, I think, is completely broken. And so that's why I just want to tell silly little stories like that.
You actually told a couple stories I really loved in the book. One about Ronald Read and Richard Foscone.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about them?
Ronald Read, I've never met either of these people. Ronald Read was a guy who was he was a gas station janitor. A gas station attendant and a janitor at a mall. Just as humble, low-key, or dare I say, like low-class, poor kind of person that you would ever meet. And when he died, he ended up leaving millions and millions of dollars to charity. And people were like, what? Like, this guy's mopping the floors and pumping gas. Like, where in the world did he get all this money? And it turned out that he took what tiny dollars he could save from his minimum wage job, and he bought stocks that he held for like 50 years and turned into millions of dollars and gave it away. But he could not have been a more ordinary kind of person. Richard could not be more polar opposite. He's born into wealth and went to Ivy League schools and worked on Wall Street and worked his way up to senior leadership on Wall Street, made tens of millions of dollars. And very soon, not that long after Ronald Read died, he filed for personal bankruptcy and just blew himself up with debt and leverage. He had a house in Florida that had multiple elevators and like a swimming pool that you could stand on top of, like all these crazy things, all heavily levered. Financial crisis hits, boom, he's out, he's bankrupt. And I use that juxtaposition to be like, you don't need intelligence and connections and education and experience to do well. All you need is like a couple of behavioral attributes that Ronald Read had. Patience, low ego, that's all you need. And even if you have all of the intelligence in the world, you can go broke. What I should have written, I kind of regret not writing, because some people pointed this out. I don't think Ronald Read is a role model. I think he had such a unique personality that he could have lived a much better life than he did, than living in a trailer, So someone asked after he died, one of his friends, what his hobbies were. And he said the only hobby he can think of was splitting firewood. Kind of thing. So someone who has millions of dollars in the bank and is just living like that, like that's not a role model. I should point that out. But he had the psychological attributes that you need to get wealthy, of just low ego and patience, even if he took it to an extreme that I think was detrimental. And so, and again, there's very few endeavors like that. You will never meet someone who is just an uneducated country bumpkin who can do open heart surgery better than a Harvard cardiologist. That will never happen. It's impossible. But not only does it happen with money, it happens pretty often, where ordinary people with good behavior outperform extremely educated people who don't have control over their emotions.
There's so much freedom in that. And realizing that the game is not actually that stacked against you,
right,
as long as you are willing to put your finger on the scale of patience.
Because a lot of people think, like, why would I try investing? Like, it's just a rigged game against me. And I think what's closer to the truth is that it's rigged against professionals who have to compete against each other on a 90-day clock. What were your returns last quarter and how do they rank next to your peers? That's what you live and die by. Like the game's rigged against them. But for ordinary people who are like, I'm just going to invest in my 401k and leave it alone for 30 years. I don't even know what my password is. I don't care. I don't know or care if somebody else outperformed me last quarter. Yeah. I'm just going to do this and follow my goals. That's where the money's made. And so I think that's the irony, is we think it's rigged against you when it's rigged against the pros.
Fascinating, because you're right. I mean, I know a ton of hedge fund guys that have all, and not that have all, I have a few that I know that have had hedge funds for 28 years, 30 years plus, but most of them flame out pretty spectacularly.
I mean, the pressure that they have, because some of the hedge funds, it's not how you perform last quarter, it's what you do literally last week.
Oh, yeah.
Like what were your returns last week? And that lifestyle, I think is nearly impossible. There's probably, a dozen people in the world who can actually outperform under those terms, and just unbelievably stressful at the same time.
Well, I mean, look at Carl Icahn today. I mean, which I think is a tragedy, but, supposedly almost bankrupt, highly levered, potentially not going to make it. And arguably one of the best investors of all time in many instances.
It's fascinating. One of the most interesting is Jesse Livermore. I wrote about him in Psychology of Money. He was the best stock trader of the 1910s, 1920s. And he was one of the only people who, in the crash of 1929, was short the market and made a fortune. And actually, after the crash of 1929, by most accounts, he was the richest man in the world. He made, during the crash, where everyone else was going bankrupt and literally jumping out of windows, the equivalent, adjusted for inflation, of like $3 billion in the crash. And he was already unbelievably wealthy. He was the best stock trader in the world. And he made and lost several fortunes, because after every big win, when he'd make the equivalent of $3 billion, $5 billion, he would take more risk, and blow himself up. And so he went effectively bankrupt like 3 times. He went from billionaire to bankrupt to billionaire to bankrupt over and over again, and eventually took his own life the last time he went broke. And so he's always so interesting to me, of like, nobody in the world was better at getting rich than Jesse Livermore. Literally the most talented person on earth at getting rich. And he had no ability whatsoever to stay rich. He couldn't do it. And so I think back to like the Carl Icahn, there's lots of people like that who are very good at getting rich and much less skilled at staying rich. And to do well financially, you need an element of both. And they can be conflicting personalities, of like a personality that says, I'm going to take a risk and swing for the fences and try to get this done. And I'm going to be a little bit scared and a little bit paranoid and be scared of debt. That you need both of those at the same time. And I think a lot of times with entrepreneurs and traders, they have a lot of skill in the first bucket, take enormous risks, very smart and intelligent. But the kind of personality that you need to be a billionaire hedge fund manager is not the kind of personality who also says, that's enough. Maybe I should put a bunch of money in treasury bonds and take money off the table. Like they just don't, that's not the kind of person. And that's why I think like Elon Musk will either be a trillionaire or bankrupt. And at this point, it's much closer to trillionaire at this point. But if you looked at him 10 years ago, when he was not the richest man in the world, you could see that. Like this guy's either going to be the richest man in the world or he's going to go bankrupt very quickly here.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in the world.
I was chuckling at some of your tweets because it was like, Elon Musk is Warren Buffett richer than Jeff Bezos this week.
I wrote that probably years ago. Now I think Elon Musk is like multiple Jeff Bezos is richer than Bill Gates kind of thing. Like it's just a completely different universe.
That's so wild. Let's talk about this for the mini. So I was reading some updated statistics on Americans living paycheck to paycheck. 62% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. A couple that's astounded me, though, is that 50% of Americans earning over 100K also do, and 36% of Americans earning over 200,000 annually say they're also living paycheck to paycheck, which kind of shocked me. What should you do every time you get your paycheck so you're not like apparently most of America?
There's two things to pick apart here. One is that we should not pretend in most parts of the country, particularly if you have kids, that $100,000 is a fortune. It's like the Austin Powers, like $1 million thing. And he's like, no, you got to like update that. It's not, of course, what it used to be. And particularly if you have kids in childcare and a big mortgage that for an inflated house that you bought in recent years, $100,000 in many parts of the country is not going to do it for a lot of people. But to answer, to really answer your question, what should you do when you get a paycheck? I think when you're looking at your expenses, you got mortgage, car payment, whatever it might be, taking care of future you needs to be near the top of that pack. And I think a lot of finance is understanding and like being kind to your future self, having empathy with who you're going to be 30 days from now, 30 years from now, and being really kind to that person and taking care of that person. And I think that's a big part of this. One part of saving too is that I've always been a big saver, and I don't feel like I'm necessarily saving for the future. I don't feel like I'm saving money. I feel like I'm buying independence. I feel like every time I save money, I'm buying a little bit of independence, and I get benefit from that today. When I save money, it's not like, oh, this will help me 10 years from now, even though it will. That helps me tomorrow if I can wake up and be like, I have a level of independence that I didn't before that's going to give me control over my life. And I think that's ultimately what people want out of money is freedom and independence and the ability to wake up and just say, I can do what I want today and make my own choices and live my own life.
You have a thesis that I really believe, which is you don't have to be smarter to make more money. You actually just have to know more and be more knowledgeable to make more money.
I think the key is that you actually just have to have the right behaviors. And this is where a lot of people get thrown off in finance, where we associate people who do well financially with big brain intellectuals. Harvard MBA, worked at Goldman Sachs, hedge fund manager. We assume that's who's going to be the best. And I think that can be true, but there's also, in a way that exists in almost no other field, you have a complete nobody living in the middle of nowhere, no education, no background, no connections, who does amazing financially because they have the right behaviors. They're calm, they're patient, they lack a big ego. They have a couple of behavioral traits, even if they know nothing about money, and that's all they need to do. And on the flip side of that, you can have the Harvard MBA hedge fund manager who blows himself up financially. Or even if they don't blow themselves up, they are actually living paycheck to paycheck. They have a lot of financial sophistication, but they have no control over their behaviors, their sense of greed and ego and patience and long-term thinking. And I think you'd be surprised how many Wall Street pros fit that bill of like big brain intellectual, not a lot of the behavioral aspect that actually is needed to do well financially over time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I saw it all the time. When I was on Wall Street, that was the norm.
Yeah.
You know, I remember one of our sales managers when I was at a company off of Wall Street, actually, at this point, he said a line to me I'll never forget, which is with his sales guys. And so they're selling financial investments to like pensions, sovereign wealth funds, et cetera. And he said, hey, when you go to hire your team, because I was a managing director, he was a managing director, he goes, you always want them to optimize for one thing. I'm like, okay, what? He's like, as many spots in the garage as possible. And I was like, why? That seems sort of irrelevant. He goes, because if you get them hooked on cars, you'll also get them hooked on employment for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I saw it firsthand. It was like, look at my Ferrari, my Lamborghini, my whatever. And then these guys were slaves to the paycheck and used to look at, myself at the time, like a dual income, no kids. I think they called us dinks. And they were like, God, this is so great. You must like not have anything to spend on. I go, well, it's also because I don't give a fuck about like cars and huge houses and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But how do you trick yourself into that? Because I think society tricks us into believing I can spend so that other people will like me or so that I can show off to other people. Do you have a trick to like that you use every day where you go, no, I actually trick my brain into thinking that saving and spending wisely is better?
I think it's a healthy, selfish motivation with money to say like, I want my money to benefit and be a tool for happiness for myself and my immediate family. And that's about where the goals end. Because I think we always overestimate how much other people are paying attention to us. And so it's easy to tell ourselves, if I had this and that and this house and this car and these clothes, other people would give me a level of respect and admiration that they're not right now. And you always overestimate how much those people are actually thinking about you. There have been some incredible studies. One, I thought it was so ingenious how it was framed. These group of researchers put a woman in a very ugly sweater, like an objectively hideous sweater, and sent her into a party. And she mingled about and she came out. And they asked her, they said, how many people in the party do you think noticed your hideous sweater? And she's like, all of them. It was humiliating. And then they go in and ask people in the party, did you notice the woman in the ugly sweater? No, 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 no. Nobody's thinking about you as much as you are. And that goes for your ugly stuff, for your insecurities, and what you might think other people will really admire you for. And so I desperately want the attention and the admiration from like 7 people in life. Right? Whose love and attention are actually a big part of my life. My family, a handful of very, very close friends. And you should not pretend that the other people walking down the street, driving past you, care whatsoever. It's not quite black and white. Like, I want to fit into the social group that I choose. And to do that, I need to talk a certain way, dress a certain way. It's not that it's not to just ignore everybody and do your own thing, but we overestimate the benefit that we get from it. And I first started thinking about this when I was about 19. I was a valet at a 5-star hotel in Los Angeles. And when somebody drove into the hotel in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, I would stop and stare in admiration, but I never thought about the driver. What I would do is I would look at the car and I would say, if I was the driver one day, people will admire me. But I didn't care about the actual driver. And one day I was like, do you see the irony here? Like, nobody cares about the driver, but they want to be the driver because then they think people will care about them. And it was just like and I think that was a big revelation for me of like, I see how this game is played now. We just overestimate the number of eyeballs that are on us. And once you come to terms with that game, you can be like, okay, well, how can I then use money rather than as a useless tool to show off for other people who aren't paying attention, but as a tool to selfishly, in a good way, improve the circumstances and the happiness and the independence of the life for myself and my family and a small group of friends around me.
I've never thought about the Ferrari that way, but you're absolutely right.
Nobody cares about the driver.
No, in fact, I negative affect the driver. I go, that guy's probably, or he's doesn't have a lot of cash, and so he wants to show it off this way, or he's like scamming people, so he's got to project that he's XYZ. That's what I think when I see it on the internet. I go,
and it's not just cars, but even clothes. By and large, if someone looks at you and says, wow, really great jacket.
Yeah.
By and large, what happens is they're not actually admiring you. They're thinking, if I had that jacket, people admire me.
You know what's interesting though? I think there's one area where I've realized there's pushback differential, and I've even seen it in myself, which is physical fitness.
Yeah.
So like if you're fit or if you're physically good looking or well-styled, but you're right, it's not I have a hot Gucci jacket or something. It's like if I am a type of person that is able to style myself and I am attractive, that actually has real reciprocal effects and probably is worth spending money on, which to me is bizarre because I never cared about any of that before.
Yeah.
But a lot of science seems to show that.
But I think it's attractive to people who either want to be part of your social group or you want them to be part of your social group. But that's a minority of people. And I feel like a lot of spending is this big, broad, trying to get the attention of people who don't necessarily care about you. And to your point, what do my wife and kids and close friends hopefully admire about me? It's not the square footage of my house or the horsepower of my car. It's like, am I a good dad? Do I play football in the driveway with my son? Do I sit and play with toys with my daughter? Am I responsive and receptive to my friends and go out and have dinner and laugh for a couple hours? That's what they care about. And I wrote about this in the book. I have a very good friend. I've known him for 20 years, one of my favorite people in the world. I love spending time with him. And of our social group, he earns the least amount of money by far. And it bothers him. And he talks about how much it bothers him. And I told him one day, I was like, if you are a good friend, a good listener, a funny joke teller, and you're hardworking and taking care of your family, you've earned like 90% of the points that I'm capable of giving you as a friend. And if you also happen to be rich and successful, maybe it would go up to like 9.2. But don't pretend like I like people because they make money. Some people will, like, I only want to be friends with rich people. And those are the fakest shallowest, shortest living friendships that will exist.
That's such a good point. What do you think about, I mean, now you've sold millions of copies of your first book, and I'm sure you will of this one as well. You've, talked to some of the richest people in the world. You've talked to some of the most successful people in the world. What have you found is the number one lie or untruth we are told about money?
I don't know if it's told so much as just expected, but there is a very clear expectation that if you wake up in the morning and you feel a little bit empty or diminished or anxious or in pain, that you can tell yourself, if only I had more money, those problems would go away. And I think to some extent, it can be true. Money can give you a comfortable life and solve a lot of your problems. But what you see with a lot of rich people is that once they gain the money, they still had a lot of problems in their life. And that can be such a jarring feeling because you told yourself, if only my net worth is X dollars, then I'll be good. And you get there and you're like, wait a minute. My friendships still aren't that great. My health is still not great. My marriage is still not that great. I still don't sleep at night that well at night. I still have all these anxieties. And so then you kind of lose your sense of hope or you double down. And so a lot of people are like, once my net worth is $1 million, I'll be great. And then you get there and you're like, well, I feel the same. So maybe it's 2 million. And you get there and you're like, I feel the same. Maybe it's 10 million. And you're just constantly chasing the high that you think you're going to get from it. Money can solve a lot of problems in your life, but this is another area that we just overestimate what it can do for you.
What is the research that you've done showed is the amount of money for which we do derive a lot of happiness? Like how much, for somebody listening, how much you're like, you know what? You really don't feel bad for going up until this amount of money.
I think it's so different for person to person and geography to geography.
Yeah.
But certainly at the lower levels, the more money you earn, the more that you can like massively increase your happiness. If your income goes from 10,000 a year to 20,000 a year, you change your life completely. And going from 50 to 100 can change your life. Yeah. Probably going from 100 to 200 can change your life. Different for everybody based off of their ambitions. But I think for a lot of people, once you own a house that has enough bedrooms for you and your kids, and you like the neighborhood that you live in, and you have good neighbors that you enjoy, and your car isn't breaking down, and you're eating healthy food, and you're doing like checking some pretty basic boxes. You have adequate health care, those things like that. And most areas in life, you might be able to get that for in different region to region, but 200, 250, whatever it might be. Then after that, it's not that the money can't make you happier, but it diminishes quite quickly from there. And at the extreme levels, is there any difference in lifestyle between Elon Musk, who's worth, I think, $600 billion, and Jeff Bezos, who's worth $200 billion? Of course not. $400 billion difference. There's no difference in lifestyle whatsoever. For most of people, there would be no difference in lifestyle between 100 million and 100 billion. You know, you have too many houses, you have planes, you have everything you could want. It just diminishes quickly from there. A more important point, though, is I think for a lot of people, there is a net worth at which not only do you stop getting happier, but your life gets more complicated and you start dealing with like big existential questions of who am I and what do I do with this? And it becomes a social liability. There's a level at which your friends and your family are going to start asking you for money. You have such higher expectations of like, how do I raise kids without spoiling them and whatnot? There's all those questions. And that level of net worth is probably lower than people think.
I remember when I didn't have much money at all, I would listen to something like this and be like, yeah, I'm going to try it. Yes. I was like, fucking great. I don't know. I'm going to try it. Like, we'll see what happens. And like when I get there, if I'm still unhappy, fine.
So be it. Right.
But I think the other thing to push back on here, and I feel this strongly, is like, you have to, like, what does Munger always say? Incentives, always incentives. And, you know, the incentive in the world today is to make you consume more, spend more, keep up with other people. Like that is just how our economic
in a competitive world.
In our society works. And so you have to like push back slightly on that and go, at what point is this all just mimetic desire where I'm chasing somebody else's dreams, somebody else's hope, and I'm stuck in a rat race that I didn't even want to enter in the first place? And, you know, I think you have a lot of reasons why we do that. And I love some of the quotes you have, like spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less. And so, you know, even for the person that's listening out there, you know, it's not like, oh, don't worry, stay poor, we don't care.
No.
It's really psychologically, if you don't rewire your brain, you actually never will get wealthy.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously, you will have a counterproductive result, right?
I think people should have a lot of ambition to have more money for independence. I think that should be the ultimate goal. It's not that money won't do anything for you and you should stop chasing it and enjoy being poor. It's not that in the slightest. You should want more, and I want more for that reason. I just want to be completely independent. And everybody is talented in their own way, can be happy in their own way if they have independence. And it's actually very difficult to express that talent and to express who you are if you are completely beholden to somebody else's goals, metrics, incentives, which most people are. And so that's where I think the ambition should be. It's not ambition necessarily for a greater material life or greater social status. It's ambition for independence.
So how do you tell if you're spending to show other people you're cool versus you're spending to get independence?
This is like an imperfect way to think about it, but I think a lot about this in my own life, which is just asking, if I was on a deserted island and nobody could see how I lived, nobody could see a single possession that I have, would I still want this thing? And a lot of people in that mental exercise would say, in that world, I wouldn't change anything. I'd have the same cars and the same house and the same clothes, and they're great. And I think a lot of people would answer that. But I think we would see.
Do you think a lot of people would say that?
I think for the most
part. Why do you need, doesn't the average American have 20 pairs of shoes? That wouldn't make sense.
Well, I think so. There is a lot of spending in the world that is purely social status.
Yeah.
It's just purely that. And so in that mental exercise, you understand the difference between utility and status, between what am I doing just to impress other people and what is actually making my life better. And you can spend a lot of money to make your life better. It's not to say on that desert island, I would have an awesome house. I would have very comfortable clothes. Yeah. And I wouldn't want to feel like a slob. I would want to feel good about myself. So maybe it wouldn't be that much different. And but you start thinking about things differently. If nobody was watching, how would I live? Because the truth is, almost nobody is watching. That's the truth for most people. So in that situation, you go to you just brought up Charlie Munger. And I just read this article about him about a month ago that was describing his last week of life, or his last year of life, I should say. And I might be getting a few of these details slightly wrong, but he built an incredible house in Santa Barbara overlooking the ocean, amazing house that a multi-billionaire would own. And then he had his house in Pasadena that he had lived in for 60 years. And by every account, it was not just a middle-class house. It was dare I say it, a dump. But he had lived there for 60 years. And in his last couple months of life, that's where he wanted to be. That's where he wanted to be. Not in the palace overlooking the ocean, the house that felt like home to him, that had the memories that he had, that was probably, I assume, surrounded by neighbors who he enjoyed and friends nearby and whatnot. And I think that model explains a lot of things in life of what you want out of this material possession is not just the price or the square footage or the things that you can measure like that. So much of it is just well, do you actually enjoy it? It's the intangible things of what you enjoy them for.
It's so interesting because you have a quote that I really liked, which is somebody saying, quotes, renting is throwing your money away is the kind of thing said by a guy who has never had to replace the roof on a house he owns.
I wrote that tweet in anger after replacing the roof on our house.
I felt that from you. I'm curious, do you think it's better to own or rent a house?
I can tell you my experience. My wife and I rented for a decade or more, and it was the greatest thing in the world. We lived in 5 different cities, and we could just pick up and go. And that flexibility at that phase of our life was unbelievable. And I was very pro renting. I don't believe houses are great investments, financial investments. That's always my view. About a week after our first child was born, I felt this overwhelming sense that I want to buy my own house and I want to do it right now. Mm-hmm. The idea of I don't want to be a transient renter. I want a firm, solid home base for my family. That feeling was so strong. So we went out and bought, and it's been great. The important thing though is you should buy when you can afford it and when you think you're going to settle down. And the idea of people doing these calculations of oh, well, actually, if I bought, I would save $100 a month versus if I rent. This is not a spreadsheet endeavor. You should do it when you can afford it. But so much of it is just the value and stability that you want for you and your family. I think we did a lot of harm in society when we taught people that rising home prices are a good thing. That did a lot of damage to people. It's a terrible thing. And B, that in the decision of whether you should buy or rent is a spreadsheet decision versus just the quality of life and the kind of life that you want for you and your family. Those two, I think, things inadvertently did a lot of damage to society.
think you're right. I mean, because when you look at the math, it's actually quite hard to argue that home ownership is better than renting
If it's just looking for math,
if all you're looking for is the financial outcome.
I would not be surprised. In fact, I think it's almost certain that I've been a homeowner for 10 years, that if I had rented the whole time, my net worth would be higher. I think that's probably right.
Well, of course.
And not a single cell in my body, if I had a time machine,
would go back and
would do it differently.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm like, I'm not doing this to maximize my net worth. I'm doing it so I have a stable place for my children. That's it. Yeah. And we can live in the school district that we want to. And I think the sense of ownership that comes with owning your house is a really good, fulfilling thing. If you're in the phase of your life where you're ready for that.
I want to talk about something else that I think maybe is a detriment to society and that people have categorized wrong. At least I think, but I'd be curious your take. Let's talk about passive income. Is it real? Can you get it? Is this reasonable for people to want?
I think it rarely, if ever, exists, because what people think of passive income is I don't have to work to get this. And anyone who's been like a landlord like realizes like that could be a full-time job for doing it, or owning small businesses. The idea like, oh, you just buy them and collect the checks tends not to be the case. You understand this better than anybody. If you're investing in the stock market, the psychological price you can pay for the uncertainty and the volatility, or investing in somebody else's private equity fund, and the psychological price tag that you pay of like dealing with that person, trusting that person, lack of trust with that person, the returns aren't coming in like you thought, you don't know when the returns are going to come in. That's a cost. And it's a different cost than driving to work and working 9 to 5 in a cubicle. Yeah. It's a different cost, but let's not pretend that it's not a cost, that you just give money to people and then the money just starts flowing back and you don't have to do anything for it. It's easy to underestimate the price tag of those things.
Yeah, that's very true. Even if you're just talking about the K1s and the tax complications.
I mean, most of it in public stocks, it's the volatility and the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And once or twice a decade, that will be harrowing. It'll be, you will not be able to sleep as the stock market's falling 50%. And you don't know if this is a run-of-the-mill correction or the second Great Depression. And you'll deal with that twice a decade.
How do you protect your mind and your psychology for those horrible financial life events like that?
I save a lot of money. Am I saving for a new house? No. Am I saving for retirement? Like, not necessarily. I'm saving for a world in which things are going to happen in the broader world and in my life personally that I can't foresee, that I am not thinking about today, and will have a major impact on my life. And so that's the psychology of it. I think a lot of financial advisors might look at my net worth allocation and say, like, what are you preparing for? Like, it's not that conservative, but probably more cash than people would generally recommend. And I think a lot of it is just being an amateur student of history. Like, all history is a constant chain of surprises that nobody saw coming, that fundamentally shape the world, usually in bad ways. And the people who do okay over time are the people who have a conservative enough financial arrangement and mental flexibility to endure those episodes.
What are the habits of rich people versus poor people you found in all your research?
Well, there's obviously a lot of survivorship bias in rich people. So you can look at someone who's very wealthy and be like, well, look what they did. They started this business and they took a huge risk and they didn't do this. And like, here's their morning routine and all that. And for every one of those things, there are 1,000 other people who did something very similarly and failed. And also I think there's a Paul Graham quote where he says half of the attributes of very successful people are actually liabilities to them. And so we can look at an entrepreneur and be like, oh, like he wakes up at 3 a.m. and runs 20 miles. Like, yeah, but that's not why he's successful. That's just, he's a crazy person in general. And he has all these other crazy attributes. Like, there's no cause and effect in that. And so, but I think if you wanted to create a common denominator of it, it's a combination of obsession and long-term thinking. It's a combination of like, these people don't obviously work 9 to 5s. They wake up thinking about their business. They go to bed thinking about their business. When they're playing baseball with their kids, they're thinking about work. It's the only thing that they can think about. And they don't want to do it for 2 years and sell their business. They want to do it for 50 years. They want to do it for 70 years. All wealth comes from compounding. And when most people think about compounding, they're like, well, how can I earn the highest returns? What is appealing is how can I earn the highest returns for the shortest period of time? And where most wealth actually comes from is like, how can I earn merely good returns for a very long period of time? That's where it tends to come from. So if you find someone who's very good at their job or very wealthy, the common denominator of those people tends to be they've been doing the same thing for 30 years or whatever it might be. And if anyone does the same thing every day for 30 years, of course you're going to get good at it.
It's so true. Like, you have another quote I love, which is that everything that ends up working in finance stems from patience and self-control. Everything that doesn't work stems from instant gratification and FOMO.
I've done a lot of work with like young students, high school students, and two things stick out. One is I think relative to previous generations, they're smarter because they have more information than we did. They're just constantly drinking from a fire hose of information. So they know things about the world that we didn't when we were 17. And the other thing is every single group among these very intelligent kids, everybody will ask me some version of the question, what penny stock should I buy to double my money this week? And I have to remind myself that like, these kids aren't dumb. They're very smart. But the knee-jerk reaction, what seems like common sense to everybody is how can I get rich the fastest? It's just what's the fastest way to get there? And that's the cause of every financial failure is usually like trying to take something that naturally should take 10 or 20 or 30 years and being like, well, great, but I don't have the patience for that. How can I compress it as fast as I possibly can? And I think that's what it comes from. And the idea of being patient is not intelligence. It's not education. That's purely just behavioral. There's some people who have no education that can be the most patient people in the world, and people who are extremely intelligent, who have the attention span of a fly. They can't keep it going. And I think it tends to be in finance that sometimes the smartest people are the most impatient, and because they want to use their intelligence and their IQ to be like, well, how can I speed this process up and get it as fast as I can? And that's the source of every blow up.
That's fascinating. It does feel like, I mean, I go back to like the Buffett quote of, why do you tell people all of your secrets? And he's like, because nobody else wants to get rich slowly.
They're not going to do it. Right. Yeah.
Which is so true. It's like, Morgan, why would you write a book on how to make a bunch of money and keep it? Because probably most people who read it aren't even going to do anything. I
think about my parents. They have no financial education. Moderate financial knowledge that was like self-taught just like very modest interest in it. And so they are not the persona of like financial sophistication, but they did one thing, which is they dollar cost average into index funds, and they haven't sold anything for 40 years, ever. And if you compared their returns to professional fund managers, they're literally not, it's beyond top 1%. It's probably top 0.1% at this point that they've outperformed for doing nothing and for knowing nothing. Because all they had was all that you actually needed was just like a profound sense of patience and leaving it alone.
Do you think that most people should just put money into a diversified investment portfolio, leave it there, dollar cost average, and that's it?
I'm not a passive investing zealot, the person who's like, nobody can beat the market, don't even try. Of course, some people can beat the market. People have beat the market, and they'll continue doing that. And some people have done that profoundly well. But it's like asking, should most people try to get in the NBA? Like, no. Like, some people can do it. Like, let's not pretend that I can do it or that anyone else. Like, of course it's hard. So whenever people bring up the statistics of like 99% of mutual funds will underperform their benchmark, they use that as a indication of like, see, the industry's a scam. My response has always been like, no, of course that's how it works. What world do you expect to live in and where everybody who tries to beat the market and make a fortune can do it? Like, of course that's never going to exist. Just like everybody who wants to join the NBA is not going to be able to. And I don't know what the statistics are of like what percentage of high school basketball players make the NBA. I don't know. It's probably 0.00001, like whatever it is. And people are like, yeah, that's how it should work. And it's the exact same in investing. So your question is like, should most people dollar cost average an index? Yes. Does that mean it's impossible to beat the market? No.
And also humans, we are like you talked about optimism bias, but we are such funny little creatures in that we will try to go beat the market. I mean, I talk to a lot of young people today too, and that's always what they want to know is, how do I buy a business for $0 in 30 days that makes me millions, that's an absentee owner that I don't need to work at.
Right.
And like the second you figure that out, fill me in.
Let me know.
I'll be right there with you.
I think a lot of it is because the barriers to entry of investing in the stock market are zero. And you can, any 17-year-old can open up a Robinhood account and transfer $20 into it and start trading the same stocks that Citadel is trading at the same time. And there's not a lot of other things in life that are like that. If you said to a 17-year-old, like, hey, do you think you can go build the Golden Gate Bridge? Like, no, of course, it's just impossible. But you can open up a Robinhood account and start pretending that you're the next George Soros, right? So because the barriers to entry are so low, it gives everyone the shot of like, maybe this is my ticket. Let me convince myself that I can do it.
It's so true. And you get this. I mean, I remember back in the day, I had a chance to invest in Robinhood when it was like super, super early on. And I'm an idiot and I didn't. But the reason why I didn't, I actually kind of stand by, which is that I really don't think you should gamify stock market investing.
Agree.
And so I remember when I saw the pitch in the background, I just thought, I don't think this is going to be good for society.
I think most people who work at Robinhood and work at Kalshi and Polymarket are good people who want to do the right things. This is not a complete moral indictment on them.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think we'll look back at those kind of tools as having helped a generation of people. I think, if you compare Robinhood to Vanguard is an index fund company, super low cost, long term. That I think you could look back at something and say like that did a lot of good for people. But something that gamifies it is really important. There's a great interview with Jon Stewart when he was on The Daily Show, where he interviewed Jim Cramer. And this was in 2008, kind of the teeth of the financial crisis when the market imploded. And Jim Cramer went on the show, and Jon Stewart's bringing up example after example of in a mockery fashion of like what CNBC was. And Jon Stewart had a quote that I loved. He was like, I know you want to be entertaining, but this is not a game. This is people's retirement. This is people's life savings. This is not the casino. This is not entertainment. It should not be entertainment. It's a very serious thing. And you can see how like if we gamified health, people would be like, no. It's like, this is not a game. Like, you don't want to do that, especially if the risk of losing is cancer or something like that. People are like, that's not a game. Don't do it. But we do that with money. And we do it to the most vulnerable segment of the population, which are young kids, particularly young boys whose prefrontal cortex won't fully develop for another 10 years as they're day trading these things.
Never thought about it that way, but you're exactly right. My first job was at Vanguard out of college. And what I remember is like going to the cafeteria in Pennsylvania, I'm totally blank, Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where the headquarters is, and walking into the cafeteria. And that was when Bogle was still alive, the founder. And he would just sit at the cafeteria table every day. And you could go up to him. He was an old gent and he would get his little, things. And he was like the opposite of what you think about as a flashy billionaire these days. He kind of famously, I think like Buffett drove a Buick. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was some old car.
Yeah.
But what I really respected out of him is that he kind of believed, he drank his own Kool-Aid. He like really believed what he was doing there. And I remember at the time they had this like, they actually had an intellectual patent on their shareholder structure, where this is like slightly technical, but like it's kind of interesting, where they are one of the only like mutual holding companies in the finance space, And I know one of the guys that was the one who came up with this model. And so it basically mandated, just like an insurance company, that you'd put all the earnings back into the funds to lower the costs.
People don't understand this. Most people don't understand this about Vanguard. Vanguard is effectively a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And the reason Bogle didn't look like a flashy billionaire is because he wasn't. He did this incredible thing when he started it. He took an entrepreneurial risk and an entrepreneurial effort and built effectively a nonprofit that he was never going to get rich off of. And Vanguard pays dividends, so to speak, in the forms of lower fees to average, ordinary people saving for retirement. Yeah. And so like you look at that, like that's a public benefit. Yeah. That's something that you look back, you're like, that benefited society. The ability for 17-year-olds to wager their life savings on a football game is not.
Is not. I totally agree. So I mean, is there a good way, like how do you learn investing without just learning gambling in the public markets?
It's harder today than it was 10 or 20 years ago because so much of the material and the tools for young people investing are strictly around gambling. Yeah. And so it's harder to do. I think in a lot of endeavors in life, if you start off not necessarily by trying it, not necessarily by like, open an account and start trading, start out by reading as many books as you can, and not books that teach you how to invest. I would read books about the history of the economy. And like that could be boring and dry for some people, but you learn very quickly about how people's susceptibility to greed and fear and regret and copying other people and that kind of, if you can understand the basic tenets of those kind of things, you can learn so much about how you should invest and the forces of investment, of greed and fear and long-term thinking and short-termism. If you can wrap your head around those concepts, you've learned 90% of what you need to know about investing before you've bought a single stock.
What are your favorite books on investing, if you had to pick?
I think the most interesting period in U.S. history was the 1930s and 1940s, Great Depression, World War II. And less about the specifics of what happened, about the military battles. Mm-hmm. It's just that there was a wider range of emotions in that 15-year period that I think has ever existed, at least in periods that we've documented very well. So you read about that period of the uncertainty that people went through, of the fear, the torment and the trauma, the happiness and elation when it was all over. The range of emotions during that period, I think, is just astounding. And so there's a trilogy of books written by a guy named Frederick Lewis Allen. And he wrote his 3 books. One's on the 1920s, so a little bit before. One's on the 1930s. And then his last one is on how America changed from 1900 to 1950. And that's been kind of my 3 favorite history books. And Frederick Lewis Allen was not writing about the big characters of the day. He's not writing about Churchill and FDR. He's writing about a farmer in Iowa. Like, what was his life like? And how did his life change when the car and the airplane and the radio came about? What was life like that? What were his fears during the Great Depression? What were it goes into detail about ordinary people doing ordinary things in a way that I think is really fascinating. This is why I think people should read more history and fewer forecasts. Like, everything that we deal with today, it's a different cast of characters, but it's the same movie over and over again of dealing with uncertainty and risk and regret. And so if you read a lot of history, even about periods that you think have no analogy to today, like the 1920s or the 1820s, it's the same emotions that people are dealing with today. And that gives you a totally different perspective of what we're going through today when you're like, you think it's unprecedented what we're dealing with, whatever it might be, AI, Trump, whatever it might be, you think it's unprecedented. It's totally not. People have dealt with this same thing in different forms for all of history.
Yeah, I'm reading one right now called Soft War by Larry Ellison.
Yeah.
Well, on Larry Ellison.
It's a great title, by the way.
I know. Isn't that so
Software.
Good?
I just got it. That's
right?
good. That's good.
But the interesting part is that it is all this repetition. So, he was building software companies, and kind of in some ways you could say the initial AI companies back in the 90s. And you can see the rhythms to today. And so it's a really fascinating book if you're into building things. Have you ever made a really reckless money decision, but it actually paid off?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily reckless, but we bought a house, I don't know, 8 years ago or so. And we came up with a budget, and here's our budget for the house. And then we're house shopping, and of course, I think a lot of people have this experience. Oh, we found this one, and it's way out of budget, but like, look at that thing. Like, that's fantastic. And it gave me a lot of sleepless nights, the decision to buy it. I'm really going to do this. But we knew our life would be better. It was a better house in a better neighborhood with better schools. And I could check all those boxes. And since I had set an arbitrary limit of what our budget was, it felt reckless. It really did feel reckless. And I should say this was during a period when my career and the economy were not going that well. And so it was like, this feels wrong, but we did it. And looking back at that, it was like, I'm so glad that we did that. So glad that we did it. To me, that's always been a thing of like, of course you can use money as a tool to live a better life. Too many people get caught up in the frugality movement of like, the best way to do everything is as cheap as you possibly can. Like, no, you can live an awesome life and have a lot of material things that are fantastic that you'll have no regrets of later. So that was an area where I'm like, I'm so glad, even though it may not have been reckless. We could still afford it, but I'm so glad that I exited my comfort zone in that area. And I think a lot of people's comfort zones are self-imposed. And sometimes you have to be like, look, for this thing that means everything to me, I want to go outside of it.
Do you ever buy anything really ridiculous? Are you ever like, I bought that diamond encrusted Rolex? No.
I mean, it's all relative, I guess. We have a cool house. My wife is really into gardening and landscaping.
Yeah.
And the amount that she spent on like rocks and trees.
Surprisingly expensive.
That is we travel well. My kids travel well. So everyone's got their little thing.
Yeah.
We go out to dinner a lot.
But there's not like nothing a Morgan Housel, like if the internet only knew.
I spend a lot on ski equipment. I grew up skiing.
Oh, that is
And that's my thing right now. I don't know if it's moving the needle that much, but if they make a better version, even if it doesn't improve anything at all, I'm like, gimme.
Are you one of those people that knows the names of all the fancy ski towns in like Europe?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That is not me. I wish when we were talking about that with, I think it was Vivian too, who I really like too. But she was like, when I realized that even though I had gone to the fancy schools and I was making money on Wall Street and whatever, she realized that rich people speak a different language because they were like, oh, we're going to Bimini and then we're going to, and she was like, where's this? What's happening?
If you know what Chamonix means, I can guess your net wealth.
Yeah.
Your new net worth.
What do you think it is? What do you have
up.
to be at least?
If you're skiing at Chamonix, 10 million.
Yeah. Whoa.
Yeah.
So if you're single, looking for a rich dude.
Chamonix.
Okay. Not that I would really pick up men that way. I don't have any experience with that. I married a sailor. Okay. Rapid fire. So I'm going to read some common money cliches, and I want you to tell me true or false.
Yeah.
And you can give me a short explanation for ones that you feel like it. Talking about money is tacky.
Can be if you're bragging and flexing with other people, but we should talk about it more because everyone's dealing with the same problems. Talking to your friends, parents, spouse, essential.
Yeah, good idea. Follow your passion and the money will come.
I will mimic Scott Galloway when he said the people who say that made all their money in iron ore smelting, and now they say it.
Buying a house is always a smart move.
No.
Renting is throwing money away.
No. It can be fantastic at that phase of your life.
All debt is bad debt?
I think all debt can be bad debt. You can blow yourself up with any form of debt doing it wrong.
That's true. Credit cards are dangerous.
Credit cards are alcohol. You can use them and have a great time and a great night. You can easily abuse them, and a lot of people do.
That's a good line. Diversification is always safer.
I think that's right, because if you're saying that safer, if you're diversified, you're not going to be the richest person in the world. That's always the case. But I think the vast majority of people don't want to. They don't want to outperform. They just want a comfortable retirement without putting too much effort into it.
Yeah. You can't beat the market.
You can't be in the NBA.
That's so true. Max your 401k no matter what.
Some nuance here, particularly for young people who might stay at a company for 2 years. Your company probably has a vesting schedule on the match. So a lot of people are like, it's free money, get the match. It's true if you vest into it. If you're going to leave a company after a year or two, and a lot of young people do, you're going to lose all that anyways.
Explain to them what vesting is if somebody listening doesn't.
Vesting is if somebody gives you money, it can be stock options, it can be a match in your 401k. I give you $1, but you don't actually get access to it at some point in the future. So I give you, here's $1, but you actually get 25 cents a year from now and another 25 cents a year after that. And in 4 years, you can have all of it. And so that's what a lot of times the match on 401ks is.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I also think people don't understand enough about stock options when they take jobs.
Our mutual friend, Brent B. Shore, had this quote where he was like, yeah, I talked to a guy and he said, I joined a tech startup and I'm making $500K a year. And Brent said, how much of that is options? And he said, well, it's 400 in options. I make $100K salary and 400 in options. And Brent goes, what's the strike price on the options? He goes, I don't know. What's the vesting schedule? I don't know. Is there a preferred stack? I don't know. And Brent goes, you make $100,000 a year. You're like, there's so many things in between there that such a big gap between the headline number and what you could actually get afterwards to make those things very different.
Yeah, you can't eat equity. I think it's like the big actual falsity of our generation is that so many people, I mean, I read a study the other day that said somewhere between 70 and 90% of stock options end up worthless.
Or worthless, yeah.
And so if you didn't actually optimize for some degree of salary, and I really do believe in upside, like take a little money off the table, sure. But all of it, oof.
Right.
Okay, 2 more. Stop buying avocado toast and you'll be rich.
No, enjoy it. It's delicious. It's not the only thing that moves the needle in most people's lives is school, house, car, childcare, health insurance. It's the only thing that moves the needle. Everything else, you're just spitting around the edges. So enjoy your toast.
Sponsored by the avocado industry. Save 20% and you'll be fine.
Save 20% and you'll be ahead of most people and better off than you otherwise would be. But you can still and will have challenges every day in your life. Money won't solve all your problems.
So Morgan Housel on all the socials. Which one's your favorite? Twitter or Instagram?
Pretty much the only thing I spend time on is X and Twitter.
I can't call
I have Instagram, but I don't use it that much.
Okay.
I don't know why.
So I'm both. I really like your stuff on X. And then the book, obviously, Psychology of Money. I feel like if you haven't read that, oh my God, you better get there. But I think your new book, The Art of Spending, is it's not even a 2.0. I almost might even start with that in some ways before Psychology of Money. I feel like you
See,
could read either of those books interchangeably.
part of the reason I wrote it is because a lot of Psychology of Money is about building wealth and investing, which is important, but not everyone is going to get to that point. But spending money impacts everybody from every income level, every generation. How you spend, what you aspire to spend on, that impacts everybody.
Yeah, and the other thing about the book that I really like, that sounds like a god awful boring book, and it's not.
Thank you.
Like, you're so good at the stories and, here's some specific takeaways without it feeling like I'm getting lectured to or there's a 372-step process.
Or there's a formula or something like that.
Yeah,
it's like,
I
no,
love
this
a
is just,
formula. You
let
got
just
me.
tell
You got
some-
me here when you said that. I was like,
Right.
fuck, it's
No, but that's
true.
what most finance books are, is a formula and a lecture. This is just, let me tell you some stories that I think you'll like about risk and greed and fear.
And they'll stick with you. And then you might actually just change your life and save more money.
I hope so.
Morgan Housel, I've just adored your books over the years. Thank you so much for writing them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about money. So often, all of us, once we make it, we don't talk about it anymore because it seems kind of gross in some ways. So I really appreciate you sharing all your wisdom today.
I appreciate everything you've done. Thanks for having me.
ever a moment where you were like, this isn't going to an actual billionaire multiple times over who's run $100 billion company? How do we steal her homework? How do we learn lessons from somebody who has won so many times in so many businesses? And in the same conversation, she actually is one of the most powerful women of all small business in the US right now as the administrator of the SBA, the Small Business Administration. So not only does she share lessons about what it takes to build a big, huge company, but she also shares lessons about how do you find money hidden in plain sight in the government from the SBA for you, and what is the future going to hold for small business. I'm really excited about this episode. Not very many people get a chance to sit down with the head of the SBA in her office and see behind the scenes what is going to happen to small businesses today. You are going to want to listen to this episode. Kelly, I'm so excited you're here.
Codie, I'm thrilled to be with you.
You grew up on a farm and came from a lot of struggle and strife that only entrepreneurs know. Can you tell me about that time?
Well, it was incredible to grow up on a family farm. And at the time, I grew up in a house that had no upstairs heating. So we'd wake up in the morning in the winter and there would be frost inside the windows. But we never thought that was anything that would be different or wrong with that. We just had electric blankets that we slept under. But I saw how hard my family worked and I was inspired by it. I saw my grandmother writing the commodity futures prices on the Formica countertop. And then when my grandfather and dad would come in for lunch, they'd look at the prices and go back out. And that's where I first got my interest in finance and markets. And I saw my mom and dad building their trucking company together and dealing with the Interstate Commerce Commission filings and the paperwork. And I saw our truck drivers coming over to collect their paychecks while my mom wrote them out. And it really impressed upon me that, wow, they're providing livelihood and they're building something for people, that people are coming to us asking them to haul loads of grain off their farm, not just our farm, but theirs. And my parents sponsored the softball team in our small town. Like I saw and what other small businesses did. And so I also saw how the toll it took on my dad, like how hard he worked, 20-hour days planting crops or baling hay, just the hard physical labor that he did it out of love for us. I mean, he wasn't always able to be at our sports games. And that was totally understood by us. Like that made us tougher. We could come home and say, Dad, we won the game. Here's how it went. And he's like, well, I won the game for you guys today too. And, it gave me a love of work. So I worked in the fields growing up a lot. I worked in our cattle lot. I showed cattle in 4-H. I learned to sew my clothes because if I wanted a nice graduation dress or a dress in college for a formal, I would sew that. And then, all the way to, getting waitressing jobs to fill in for high school and college expenses and having that experience working in small businesses, waitressing, working in retail stores. And that gave me such a strong, well-rounded experience. That's why I'm so honored to serve at the SBA, to serve the small businesses that I know firsthand what they mean on our main streets.
So good. I also think I've met a few farmers, and you guys are totally better at Wall Street commodity trading than the best suits and ties. I mean, I think the drawl is always the giveaway. That's when I know I'm in trouble because they give me a little, well, hey, I don't know about that. And then they know about that. So I got a lot of respect for farmers.
Well, they have a lot of skin in the game. I mean, nothing like having thousands of bushels of a cash crop on your hands to force a decision.
One of the things I was curious about is you and your husband have run multiple businesses together and seem very aligned. What's the secret to doing that?
Boy, that's a great question. First of all, I'm incredibly blessed. That's the first open secret right there. Well, I am so blessed to have met him at a time in my life when, things could have gone either way. I thought, I've been moving around the country for 10 years, taking increasingly more responsible jobs. And I thought coming to Atlanta was going to be another stop on that career trajectory where I was working to find my fitting. I'd just gotten my CFA and had worked in private equity, had worked in as an equity analyst, and then was interested in doing investor relations. And I ended up joining the executive leadership team, ultimately working my way up to that. But we both just connected on our Midwestern values, our love of our like families, our work, our shared passion for improving ourselves and giving back. Like we're both very altruistic, but we're also competitive. So we kind of feed on that. And I'm just so blessed. We get along great. We love talking about business. And we both understand what's important in life. And it's not the monetary. I mean, people make a lot of our wealth or success, but it's something we don't really spend a lot of time talking about.
Interesting. Yeah, you're not very flashy.
Yeah, I drive a Kia Telluride. I do
out of
have
town.
Yeah.
Really? You don't want to roll up in the Lambo?
Made
to the
in Georgia.
SBA?
Well, I'll admit I do. I have a Porsche, and I do love, and because when I was 11, living on our farm, a guy in a Porsche came driving up to drop off something for my dad from a grain elevator. And I was like, what is that car? And when I found out it was a Porsche from age 11, I always wanted one. So, I do think it's beautiful engineering and they go fast and I love racing and all that. But I'm most comfortable just driving around town in my Kia Telluride, made in Georgia.
I love that. Also, I'm a bad driver, so I shouldn't be trusted with nice cars. So I'm into that. Okay, so you chose well with your partner. And the only reason I want to ask one more question about partnership, because I think, at least for me, I work with my husband. It's the best thing that I ever did and also the hardest. Like our first year working together was really, really hard. And I wasn't sure we didn't make a mistake at first. I was like, oh my gosh, can we really do these two things? And now it's a gift that I feel like was taken from us as society. Like it was bad to work with your family. It's bad. It's nepotism. It's all these things. And I think that was a giant lie. And instead, it's really beautiful to get to build with your family. Like, what do you think? And what advice would you give some young man or woman out there that could learn maybe what partnership is like in business and love and marriage?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. It is such a gift. And I saw my parents working together on our farm every single day, building my dad's trucking company together. My dad started it the year I was born after he got out of the National Guard. He'd learned to drive a fuel truck in the Guard and thought, okay, I'll add trucking to our farm, which was transformative for our family, just particularly in the lean years of farming where negative cash flow. And so I saw my mom helping my dad build that business and how amazing it was to have a family that all worked together. And now we're on the 5th generation on our family farm. It's incredibly rewarding, the pride and the ability to work through the challenges together. I think it's something that our country is a little bit lost. And you've pointed that out. I've heard you talk about like 80% of people in America in the 1800s were small business owners, and now it's 6%. And I think that's tragic. And I really appreciate all the work you do to encourage entrepreneurship, even though back on the farm and in the small town I grew up in, everyone was an entrepreneur, but we never knew that word.
Yeah, right.
It was just everyone felt like they did what they did because it was their calling.
I think one of the interesting parts about you is you have built all these really big businesses previously, cross-sector, and yet, you started really without a lot, which I'm sure small business owners can relate to. They might hear how big your businesses are and not think that you understand what it's like to be a little guy. But was there ever a moment where you were like, this isn't going to work, I'm totally going to fail, and we're going to lose everything?
Over and over and over. That is essentially like it's the setbacks and the rejection that I remember more sometimes. That's what always fueled me. And
do you have a big juicy one?
Oh my goodness. Well, from my earliest time in my career, I mean, I applied for jobs I didn't get. I went back and got those jobs. I've never accepted rejection. I've been tenacious about it, but I've also had huge setbacks, whether it's in working on deals or working on businesses that we thought that was the end of the opportunity, and just kept going. And I think it comes from really how I was raised. I mean, on a farm, you are raised in that situation. You don't have any guarantees, and you figure it out, and you work hard until it's done. And I think just that tenacity really saw me through a lot. And, certainly building a career from Wall Street now into the cabinet, from rural America, I think that just really taught me to dig in, keep going, keep learning, and keep the curiosity about how things work, and keep asking questions, and never accept the first no.
Yeah. Yeah, you seem like when we were talking kind of behind the scenes, you're like, I like it. I want to be in there. I want to be like making a difference. I was like, wasn't it scary to run for Senate? That sounds horrifying. You were like, no, like put me in, coach. So you got a little of that inner psychopath. I'm into that.
Yeah. Well,
What about, so you owned an MBA, a WNBA team, which seems incredibly hard in just every aspect, not as much funding, lower ticket sales, and then there was inner turmoil in the WNBA. What was the hardest moment for you running that business?
well, I think the biggest decision came when my business partner and I, we were 50-50 owners, but before that, we were minority owners. And there came a point where the majority owner decided to sell. And we had to look at each other and say, do we want to step up and be 50-50 owners? And I was running a big part of our publicly traded company at the time. And I had to have confidence in the team that we brought on to really run that business day to day. And also the funding. I mean, it was, it's not an inexpensive endeavor to sink money into that every single year.
Was it public how much that was?
No, but it's a couple million, and it was, we'd hoped to be able to get it to break even, but to the point, back then the bigger decision was to say, is this a go or no go? And I believe that when life opens a door for you, and like to walk through it, and that life had opened a door for me as a professional sports team owner. And walking away at that time didn't seem like a good option. And I'm really glad we walked through it. We owned the team for a decade. And it was very grassroots. In fact, I was working with a reporter one time and pitching a story. I mean, I was, making sure that we got the visibility. I had this vision because of what I'd seen living in Chicago during the Bulls run in the 90s. And I thought, my goodness, I see what sports do for a community. They really bring it together. And I think Atlanta could be a great sports town. And so we invested on that basis to not have this as a hobby, but to make this a business and a great community contribution. And we were so glad that we walked through that door and did that for a decade for our fans, for our community, to elevate the sport. And it turned out to be such a good, I learned so much being a sports team owner that applied to business. Because in business, sometimes you can kick the can on a problem. In sports, you can't do that.
Why? Everybody's just yelling at you all the time?
Well, because in sports, the scoreboard shows the results every single day. The ticket sales show the results every single day. The coaching shows the results. And so you have to make those decisions game time. And so I started doing that in business, running my businesses like a coach would run a team. And I became a lot more effective, decisive, and not afraid about what decisions were around the next corner. It just really emboldened me to make those decisions and keep going.
I'm a huge Phil Jackson fan, and it really stuck with me a lot. I read his lessons often on how to be a good leader.
Yeah, the Zen master. Yeah.
He was. I never would have known.
Yeah, he was. He really ran an amazing team. When you read about the dynamics of the Bulls and how the players didn't necessarily all get along, but they brought so much electricity to the court, to the community. And it was just a huge lesson for me watching the Bulls. It was instructive, not just as a sports leader, but as a business leader.
What do you think your leadership style is? Like, you've been successful in WNBA, you've been successful in a Senate race, you're the administrator of the SBA, you've also run these huge public companies. How do you keep winning?
Well, I think it's you learn from the losses. And there's more losses than wins, to be honest. When you get to this point in life, you start looking back and you're saying, I'm really glad for some of those hard times. And some of those hard times were the best times. I think back to when our company was a startup. I mean, today it's $100 billion Fortune 500 company, but when we had 100 people and it was working every single weekend without a single day off, straight through, get there early, leave late, come back, over and over, cancel the vacations. The birthday dinner turns into a due diligence review up in New York. All those things, those were the best times. I didn't need a birthday dinner. I didn't need the vacation. I mean, these were the things that built the trajectory for success. And so I'm always happy to run into the fire. It's why I was able to start a crypto company in 2017, because I love to see a challenge, and I'm so blessed. My husband, Jeff, was the founder of that Fortune 500 company, and he's a visionary who is an engineer, and he takes every problem apart at the nuts and bolts level. And that's kind of how we've worked through a lot of challenges. And, I'm a little different. He's a genius. He's brilliant. I'm more of a hard worker. I didn't have the gifts of the intellect that he had, but I'm a hard worker. That's my superpower. And I have a deep well of curiosity. I love to get atomic level on things. That's why I was the only chartered financial analyst that's ever served in the U.S. Congress.
What?
So, yeah.
Okay, you're obviously smart if you have a CFA. That's like the highest, basically, level financial certification you can have. And the failure rate for like level 3 is something like 90% or something. It's like each level gets harder.
Yeah, well, I worked really, really hard on studying for it. And I made sure I passed every level on the first try. And it was a great challenge. And I love a challenge. And I think approaching everything like this is a challenge I can do makes all the difference, instead of, oh, I'm a victim, I'm a woman, only 11% of the people that pass this exam are women. I just said, I know I can do this. So I think accepting everything as a challenge, as opposed to saying that it's all stacked against me, makes all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was a quote I was reading the other day. Somebody asked Michael Dell, they were like, Michael, how much did you work during those first, few years of building your company? And he was like, I worked all the hours. And so I think, is that what it takes to build a multi-billion-dollar company? Is there any way to build it with a 4-hour work week, a lifestyle business?
No. And why would you want to do that? I think part of the journey of life is creating and building and being with people. I mean, we haven't really talked about the people element. The most fascinating part of what I've experienced over my 30-plus year career is interacting with people, learning from them, and what works, what doesn't, how to succeed. And that doesn't come from just doing deals. That comes from experience at the negotiating table, walking away from it, coming back to it, having the discussions, whether it's internal within our own company. We used to promote internal dissent and debate. And then we'd make sure we pressure test everything internally and had the fights internally before we exposed them externally. And did things before we announced them. A lot of people love to run a company by press release and say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. No, we didn't do any of that. We would do the thing and then we'd say, we've been doing this for a month and our customers love it. So I think, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, was so important. And it's about making sure that you have people that are bought into the vision for doing the work, not, taking the victory lap.
Yeah. How do you foster dissent in an organization? How do you get people to like competing for the best ideas?
Well, I think it goes back to the original question you asked me about what kind of leader am I? I'm a hands-on leader. I try to run as flat organizations as we can. Like, we're all on the same team. Like, the team first concept is we're all in this together. If you fail, I fail. And so I want you to succeed. And that's why I am really careful about the teams I pick. And, loyalty is important, but you're being loyal to me if you say, Kelly, I don't think that's a good idea. It's not disloyalty. I don't want to be encircled by yes men. I want people to say what you're doing is maybe not the optimal way to do this. Have you thought about this? And I may take it on board. I may not, but I'm like, thank you for letting me know. I'm glad we've had this conversation. And so I think just really encouraging communication and dialogue. I feel like someday communication is going to be a lost art within the business world.
It does feel like that. But, and maybe that does go back to, sort of this, you've played a lot of games where you either won or lost publicly. Running a public company, got to have quarterly results, WNBA, nightly scoreboard. And so unlike a lot of people in the government, you're like, no, there are consequences to my actions, which is probably kind of shows across all of your businesses. So if you're talking to a small business owner right now who's worried about inflation and what's happening around them, what would you tell the people that you're about to see on the street?
Well, the great thing about small businesses is they live in a very dynamic environment. And so I hear from them all the time as I travel across the country. And what I'm hearing is that they want taxes to be made permanent, the tax cuts to be made permanent. They want taxes to be low. They want regulations cut. They want fair trade. They're excited about the conversation we're having on making America produce things again, onshoring our manufacturing. And I also think small businesses need a focus on skilled workforce by education. I mean, we really need to look at our educational system and say, what are the skills and the trades of the future? And so that's critically important because so many small businesses can't fill roles, can't find the skilled workforce. So we're working with small businesses across that entire spectrum to make sure that they have the resources they need. Chief among those at the SBA is access to capital, which is our bread and butter, to help small businesses access lending through our partners in the private sector, your local community bank, or things like a credit union, and making sure that they have the lifeblood of their business, which is capital.
Yeah. So do you think that you guys, as an administration overall, will small business owners get those permanent tax cuts? Will there be like a pro small business environment? Because lots of people say they love small business. But do you think that is actually going to happen?
Well, look, there's no bigger fan of small business than President Trump and this administration. And I do believe we're working quickly toward Congress having that 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extended, hopefully made permanent. That will provide tremendous certainty for small businesses to invest and grow and hire and drive our main streets. And I believe manufacturers and businesses of all kinds are really spring-loaded, just waiting for that tax cut to come through. But in the meantime, we're working really hard on deregulation because regulation, and in fact, the Biden administration passed $1.7 trillion in regulation, setting an all-time record by many multiples of massive regulation. That's a tax on small business, disproportionately on our manufacturers as well.
Yeah, we were reading some statistics earlier about how that is somewhere between $8,000 and maybe some other people say $15,000 per employee by federal taxes on small businesses. So there's a real regulatory drag,
Yeah.
it seems like.
Yeah.
And so, let's talk a little bit about the things we can control, because I think sometimes hearing about everything the administration is going to do, you're like, great, I'll keep working while we wait for that. So one of the cool things you guys have done is what I call like showcasing money hiding in plain sight. So the SBA obviously provides tons of loans to small businesses. What do you think most small business owners don't realize they have access to with the SBA that they do? Where is your like hidden free money?
Well, actually, that's a great question. I actually think the SBA is not well understood. What we do is provide government-backed guarantees to private sector loans and loans that may not be extended but for that government guarantee. And what I love about these programs is they're self-funding. They're not taxpayer funded. When run properly with the right underwriting guidelines, these loans pay for themselves while generating access to capital for the small business, growing the tax base, driving employment. So it's a really free enterprise / private public partnership type thing that is unique in government. Usually it's government giving a grant. What we focus on is making sure that qualified businesses who can't get capital elsewhere can get them through the SBA, those loans. And that's what I'm really proud of, is that we're making these loan programs better and more accessible.
Yeah. And so if you're a small business owner listening right now, like, is there any downside to going to your local SBA office and just saying, hey, I want to see if I could be pre-approved for a loan for X or Y or Z? Like, should every small business owner be at least meeting with their local SBA?
Absolutely. So we have 68 offices across the United States at the SBA. And what you can do is start having those conversations. Maybe you don't need capital right now, but you need access to some of the counseling that we do through our small business development companies that really help small businesses build toward accessing capital or planning their expansion. And we can work across the federal government to connect them to other resources that, as you say, capital hiding in plain sight. Like, could there be other programs? The SBA also oversees government contracting. We have to ensure that small businesses get about 23% of federal contracts. And we have programs to help them onboard into federal government contracting, which I'll admit is not the easiest thing to navigate in the world. And we're trying at the SBA to demystify that and make sure that it's really small businesses that are getting that benefit.
It's so good. So we'll put it in the show notes. You should definitely go to the SBA. We'll link where the field offices are. No downside to saying, how could you guys help me? And the entire job of those field offices is to give you resources. That's what
right.
they're paid to do.
That's right. And we have lending folks in our offices that can help direct you to what those loan services are, or they may say, maybe what you want more of is more of the counseling side and working with our partners in that.
Yeah. And can they help you put together a package to actually get money? So if you're like, hey, I want to get a loan from the SBA, here's sort of what I have. Can they look at it and go, well, you should beef up this part of your business plan. You should think about it this way?
Yeah. So the lender relations specialist in each district will, kind of navigate you through that program. They'll connect you with a lender. We actually have an online lender match service that you can access as a small business just through our website and see if there's a lender that might be interested in your type of, sector or type of loan. So you can do it that way too, even if you don't want to go into an office.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I also know that you guys have a list of like the top 200 or something most common lenders with the SBA. So you can kind of see who is playing this game often. I think a lot of times people are like, the SBA loans are really hard to get, which is true in some ways, but also it might be because you're going to a lending institution that doesn't actually work with the SBA and they say they're a big lender, but they're in the bottom quartile. And so if you go to people who are at the very top, and I won't name names, so everybody's our buddy, but it seems like if you go to people who already do the thing, then they will have a higher likelihood of getting approved for the thing.
That's very true. And then there's also just the fact that these are government guaranteed loans. Certainly the lender takes the first loss. So these are underwritten to traditional private sector lending underwriting standards. But at the same time, we have to ensure that they're underwritten so that the government isn't put in the position, or the taxpayer, which is also a small business, is put at the position of funding losses. So we want to make sure that portfolio is performing as it should. And generally it does. We operate a $444 billion loan portfolio at the SBA.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You also have incredibly low default rates.
Yes.
I think actually, what surprised me is a lot of people, we teach thousands of people how to buy businesses and we use SBA loan programs all the time. And people were like, normal people can't buy a business. The loans, they're underwater. You have this personal guarantee. It's so big and scary. And it is. It should be. Anytime you take somebody else's money, you should be really thoughtful about it. But, your loan rates are incredibly low. So I also think the SBA is a great filter for, should you even buy this business?
That's right.
Right? If
Yes.
the SBA won't approve it, is it good?
That's right. And I have talked to a number of business owners who have said to me, I got my first loan through the SBA. I would not be in business today. I was a sous chef. My wife was a teacher. We barely had any assets, but we had a great idea. They got an SBA loan, but they also said we were never so happy when we paid off that SBA loan. And it gives them the discipline and the confidence to get into business and then start repaying that loan.
Yeah, and now you guys have done some interesting things where I saw for the first time ever, you can start to have multiple people on an SBA loan to diversify some of your single party personal guarantee risk, which I think is really lovely for people who don't have a lot of assets.
That's right. We've tried to make the programs, make sure that they are performing well, but make them realistic for how deals in the private sector actually work. And a lot of times when you have people designing loan programs that haven't been in the private sector, that don't understand how deals work, that they may not have that flexibility. So we're trying to make sure we have the belt and suspenders on the underwriting standards, but also make sure that they work in the real world.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. I think a lot of times the SBA loan not going through was a benefit to the buyer of the business, and they didn't even realize it.
Well, and that's right. We don't want to saddle people with loans and potential defaults and bankruptcies that we could have foreseen by having the prudent underwriting standards, which we just put back in place at the SBA, and that will strengthen the programs back to where they were.
Yeah, I like it. What would you say to people who say, man, the SBA loans take too long, and so they kill my deals, or I can't buy a business because they're not fast enough?
Yeah, I hear that, but I also think that that is where we need to make sure that we have the right lender on the program, and that's why our lender match program was developed to ensure that borrowers are talking to a full spectrum of potential lenders. But also, we are being self-critical and looking at where do we have too much red tape and bureaucracy, and how do we run this like the business that our small businesses have to operate. They have to do more with less. They have to navigate all kinds of bureaucracy. We should be the last place that they're encountering massive red tape. So we are taking a hard look at that. And we actually set up a red tape hotline at redtape@sba.gov to let our small businesses tell us where are they struggling, not just in the loan process, but where are federal regulations weighing them down needlessly? Because I saw it firsthand when I was in the Senate. Like, there's a lot of focus on legislating and rulemaking and regulations. There's not a lot of focus until we got to DOGE about how do we roll some of that back. And President Trump is leading the charge on that again. He did it in 2016, eliminating multiple regulations for each new one. We're doing it again, at least eliminating 10 for every new regulation. And that's something that I think is picking up momentum, not just in the federal government, but in the states where there's also a lot of regulation.
So let's look into the future. If they don't get access to somebody like you, now they get to sit and listen and hear from you on what is the future with this administration with small business, and what are some of the initiatives that you think are going to be really incredible for small business owners.
One of the things I'm most excited about is our Made in America manufacturing initiative at the SBA, which amplifies President Trump's America First agenda. And what does that mean? It means we're creating opportunities in America that had been hollowed out from us over the last 3 decades, where we lost something like 70,000 factories. 5 million jobs in our manufacturing heartlands are gone. We can do that again in America. And I have been across this country going through factories and hearing from owners of, and these are small businesses, most manufacturers, 99% of them are small businesses. And they've been telling me, I have been fighting the notion that we can't make things in America for 2 decades. And it's happening. And I see it as tremendous opportunity for small businesses because they supply the larger producers with the subcomponents and the parts and the materials that they need. They provide the restaurants for the workers. They provide the retail stores. I think we're on the cusp of not just a manufacturing, but an America First renaissance in this country. And I hope everyone will be a part of it, because I think if we can get the tax cuts done, the deregulatory agenda continuing to advance, we're on really at the dawn of what President Trump says is truly a golden era, because for too long, people have underestimated the American worker and American industry. And we're getting back to that now.
I get chills. Well, I'm so appreciative of your initiatives to push forward small business. I can tell because I've met with your staff and other members of your team that you guys are actually really pushing for the little guy. And so I hope people take you up on all the initiatives at the SBA and go and look at the resources and meet with your local members. And then also you guys do an incredible job highlighting content too. So if there's like companies that, are small businesses that want to get highlighted as well, I know that there are spaces on the website there. Administrator Leffler, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Cody, it was great to be with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. If you want to see all the resources we talked about today, we actually compiled them for you into this little report. If you want that, then click below. You can get the link right here for all the SBA resources. If you guys liked this episode, wait until you see the one we have coming next. If you are not subscribed to the podcast, like apparently something like 60% of you guys are not right now, we are missing out. You guys are going to want to have a notification for the next podcast, because we are going to find more hidden money and we are going to hear from more world leaders to see how you can change your life and your business. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. We called this podcast The Big Deal because you are a big deal to me. No matter how small your business is or how big your business is or how big or small your life is, you really matter. And I hope you felt that in this episode. We are here to make sure that you continue to have the thing I believe leads to more freedom than anything else, which is money. I think that's the lifeblood of small business, is making sure cash flow stays in. And I think that is the answer to freedom for most people, is when you have more cash, you can actually architect the world around you. And so I want to thank you for being with us in this podcast. It means the world to me. And I just want you to know that we do everything in our power every single week to make sure that you are still the biggest deal on this podcast. We'll see you next week.
When you are starting a business, you gotta be kind of unhinged. And today on this podcast, I wanna talk about how do we move fast, but make sure that we give ourselves enough time. And then 2, I wanna nail the number 1 thing that most people get wrong when they're building a business. I think most people actually kill their business by caring too much about what other people think. Hi, and welcome back to the Big Deal podcast. I'm Codie Sanchez, and today we're gonna learn some things that you will never learn in business school, but you need to know if you wanna make a lot of money. And I wanna start out with this line from Warren Buffett, like one of the best investors and business builders of all time. He says, "You can't produce a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant." And this applies to almost every part of investing and building. Most people, though, don't realize it. So they want, 6-pack after 1 month at the gym. And I get it, speed is essential, but you gotta have time. You need a long enough runway for the really interesting stuff to happen. So first, let's talk about runway and thinking about reasonableness when it comes to making money. So if you look at my resume, by the way, if you see me on social media, you might be like, she's always had a lot of money. She's always built businesses. But that's not actually how it was. In the beginning, it started out, I was a Walmart model. Shocking, not a runway model. I was a reporter in Latin America. I was on Wall Street. I did private equity. I owned laundromats. Now I'm a YouTuber. I'm a fund manager. When you zoom out, there's a common thread of ownership and actually investing throughout all of this. Even though it looks completely disjointed, that thread actually becomes a moat. My point here isn't for me to tell you my entire background. The point here is to say it's gonna take a minute, so set that expectation. But here's how to make it go way faster. When you are starting a business, you gotta be kind of unhinged. So let me tell you just a few of the absolutely unhinged things I did to grow my business, and hopefully you can steal some of these ideas. So to start, I didn't have a 5-year plan. I didn't have a 5-month plan. I didn't have a business plan. So one of the first things we did, we actually printed out these, there's about 5,000 stickers. I think I spent maybe $1,000 on that. And then I went to a newsletter conference that I was not invited to because this business, Contrarian Thinking, started as a newsletter. We covered the walls, bathrooms, hallway mirrors. We spent about $10,000 on hats because my plan was to put those everywhere. Small problem, it was a stolen logo because I did it on Fiverr, so that didn't work out great. I still have those hats to this day. Actually, throw me that pink one over there, will you? Don't sue me. I think this company is called Brain Dead or something like that. I ended up giving away those hats to a bunch of people in order to get newsletter subscribers. It worked out. We also taped Contrarian Thinking logos to every wall in my house. So in every Zoom meeting, it was behind me, even though it was just me, a ring light, my dog. These billboards are kind of cool. So I did a little tradesies to get billboards that said short stocks by laundromats. And I put them all over Miami. Some of this stuff is not that scalable, right? But it worked because it was cheap and it was free, so if it was free, it was me. You can afford to look a little crazy right now. It is okay in the beginning for you to do crazy things to get started. Gates said, if everything you do needs to work on a 3-year time horizon, you're competing against a lot of people. But if you're willing to invest on a 7-year time horizon, you're competing against a fraction. So have long-term plans, but allow yourself to be scrappy in the beginning, because I think most people actually kill their business by caring too much about what other people think. By the way, nobody ahead of you is going to care. When you're young and dumb, you can be young and dumb. A perfect example of this is a company called Cluely, for example, that they did this video, which is the most ludicrous video I've ever seen, and now it is all over Twitter.
Profile says you worked at Bananazon?
Yeah, I've been there for the past 8 years doing senior software engineering, so coding.
Really?
Look, I know I look a little young for my age, but I promise you, I'm 30 years old.
Okay, well, maybe you are just way older than you look.
This video got them more than 10 million impressions, and now everybody knows the name of them and their founder. And it was pretty cheap to produce. The problem is the Sam Altmans of the world, well, they would never be able to do this because it would make them look really silly. So when you're young and dumb, use that to your advantage. If you don't do crazy things, how can you expect to have crazy success? And maybe tell me in the comments, what are some of the craziest things you've done to build your company? What are the craziest things you're thinking? I'll tell you if it's a terrible idea or not. And also tell me, where did you try something and it totally failed? Maybe I can tell you why that didn't work. Okay, next. Now we need to talk about how do you 10x your company. So you've gotten it off the ground. You got this little baby, the baby's moving because you're doing crazy things. But now how do we get this company really motoring? How do we get you to have the life in the company that you want? Well, hiring is the only thing a founder does that is truly important. And there's many founders that say that. Sam Altman, who created OpenAI, Elon Musk has like a beautiful quote where he talks about the fact that the best people out there are not worth 2x others, they're worth 10x. And sometimes they're worth 1,000x. And so everything you do should be to find your top performers. In fact, there's like an amazing story actually about Steve Jobs. He used to work at a company called Atari. So he didn't really like to shower. He refused to wear shoes, so he had his like smelly feet out everywhere. And he wanted to sleep at the office. And the founder at the time was getting all this heat from the other employees telling him like, no way. Can I work in a place where that guy is such a grosso? And what's funny is the founder knew that Steve was so good that he was worth 1,000 other engineers. So what did he do? He let that motherfucker sleep at the office. He let him not shower very often because he was that good. And if you go through the biggest business billionaires of all time and see their common thread, they all have a story like this. In fact, like one of my favorite investors who runs a company called Renaissance, and he said that the best engineer they had, the best performer that they had, used to type with his toes during the day, which is like, can you even imagine such a thing? Why would they let somebody do that? Because your top performers will make your life so much easier. I have talked to hundreds of founders about their biggest mistake, and it is not a how, but a who. They chose the wrong business partner. I've done this twice, by the way. I chose the wrong business partner and entered business hell. And at one point, I had to pay $1 million plus to get that business partner out of my life. So the question is, how do you find the right people, not more people? The thing about high performers, they look the same every single time. And a high performer typically hits the top 5. So that's a known performer, meaning like you already know the guy. You're like, oh yeah, that guy was on my team. He's amazing. I already know he's a high performer. They have already done the job, which basically means that you want to hire somebody who's an engineer who has already been an engineer before. You don't want to have untested talent. They have worked at a company that is just like yours. So if you're a media company, they've worked at a media company before. They actually have worked on your problem set before. So say you're a fast-growing startup and the issue is like, you can't handle all the inbound you have. You don't want somebody that's only worked at Dell where they just kind of like business as usual, even if they were an engineer at the same type of company that you have. And then finally, you want them to work in a company your same problem size. If you are a startup, you want somebody that's been in a startup before. Really hard to bring somebody down from Google to startup land again and say, hey, you got to be an employee here with none of the resources. So that's what we call cheetah versus house cat matrix. Why? Because we think that cheetahs and house cats, they're both cats. One of them has stripes, one of them has spots, but what's the real difference? You only want one if you're taking down really big deals, right? The cheetah moves faster, the cheetah's got real teeth, and I think a lot of times we end up hiring people or bringing people into our mix because they're a cat. They're just like they're a house cat. They just want to hang around, they want to eat a bunch of your food, and they want to not do much, sip some milk. Like, we're not interested. We want hunters here. So, how do you find these people in the wild? Well, when I ran a finance business in Latin America, I realized a couple things. Our top reps weren't a little better, they were 10x better. And even in like a really small market, which would be like Venezuela or Uruguay versus Mexico and Brazil. And so we gave the best people the best markets. And all of a sudden they were 20x better. So I was like, okay, if I realize that all the things are true about top talent being high performers, then do I just go put my resumes on a job board? No. We've got to actually go out and find them, or what we call the 4 C's to top level talent. So let's break it down. First, curate. So you actually have to start hiring before you start hiring. So let me give you an example. I have this employee that works for me, Jacob. He's one of our writers. And I read his work for a year. And I sent him a DM way before I needed a writer. And what was wild is like this DM kind of went like this. It was like, hey, I loved that line you wrote in the newsletter, XYZ. This is amazing. Really cool. And his response was like, oh, yeah, that's so great. Thanks, I really appreciate it. Then we developed a relationship. That lasted for a year. And I just stayed in touch with him until I actually needed him. This is the long game. For you dudes out there, this is how you hire people. It's also how you get chicks, at least good ones, is you take a long amount of time to make sure that you treat these potential hires like talent. You are slowly but surely going after them. And so a couple ways you could do that really tactically. One, bookmark stuff that makes you say, damn, I wish I wrote, built, sold that, did that. And then follow up with those people. Ping them on LinkedIn and Twitter and just say, hey, this is really cool. What do you do? Tell me about you. Keep a little Excel spreadsheet, that's what I do, of top talent and just like check in with them every so often. So that's curate. The second is cultivate. So in this case, with Jacob, for instance, I was like complimenting their stuff. I was asking smart questions. I was sending them ideas. Then I might hire them for a 1-hour consult, like nothing crazy. I'm not trying to get them in completely. I get to test before I buy. So another example of this is a guy I have here, Brad. Brad helped as an interim leader and our head of content because I had been in touch with Brad for years. 2 years ago, I told him, if you're ever on the move and leave your company, let me know. He wasn't ready then, but when he left his last role, I pounced. He was like, I'm ready to do consulting. I'm happy to come in and build your team. So he helped me for basically 4 months hiring and finding the best talent out there. So you're gonna start following up with people continuously over time. 3, close. When it's time to go hard. There's nothing worse than, like Matthew McConaughey says, if you're gonna do it, don't half-ass it, go all the way. So fly them in, meet their spouse, pay more than you're comfortable with. I wasn't even looking for a company president when I met Mark. This is my new president. I wanted a CRO. I didn't want to pay the cost of having a president. But after one conversation, I was like, this is our guy. So I was like, I'll move your family out. I'll change the org. Let's go. You don't wait for top talent to fit your role. When you find top talent, you bring them in. And I actually obsess on this at our scaling workshops and in SMB boardroom, where we teach you guys how to find the best talent, how to close the best talent, and how to make sure that talent makes you money and stays. So if that's something interesting for you guys, you should click the link below to come to SMB boardroom. This is only for people who already have a business and you guys want to grow it. Okay, step 4, continue. Top performers, they will not stay forever, and that's okay. But when they leave, don't be a dick. Keep them close. You know, I talk shop with people who left before, like Joe, who used to head content for me. We stay in touch. Why? Because they're gonna be your next referral source. They're gonna send you talent better than any recruiter. So Joe, for instance, he now runs his own 7-figure business. We still trade notes. And even though he left, I'm super proud of him. I'm proud of him for becoming an owner. So like, shout out Joe, but he also helps me all the time. He's like, check out this guy, you should hire him. Hey, I'm using this guy, do you want them? And the reason why is because it is so rare. How many of you guys have had a boss that when you left, you're like, I would light this fucking place on fire. Like if I could light it on fire, I'd be thrilled. I can't wait for this person to fail. That's not what you want to do. When you bring top talent in, you want to treat them like the way that you thought they were when they came on board. Because like Steve Jobs says, a small team of A+ players can run circles around a giant team of B and C players. So if you want a business that doesn't feel like a colonoscopy every single day to go into it, you got to hire people who are better than you. Our last segment, though, is culture starts at the top, which means that if your team isn't acting the way you want them to, it's probably you. I think that culture doesn't drip down, it radiates out. It's like a cold. It spreads person to person, desk to desk. It's the people sitting 3 seats over. It's the one employee's text, like when everything goes sideways, how does your team react? And you all know, there's like probably somebody in your business, in your team, who like sets the tempo. You're like, that person is a cancer and I wish they weren't here, and they're dragging the whole team down. Or alternatively, they're what we call your Bobby. They're the person who drives everybody forward. So like my Bobby runs BizScout. It's our platform for buying and selling small businesses. And usually the best A players are like Swiss Army knives. He basically can do anything, as evidenced by the fact that he goes and like beats people up for his side hobby. But when we interviewed Bobby, I thought I was vetting him, but it actually wasn't like that. He was vetting me. He was like, this is how you know if you got a high performer, by the way. He goes, how big do you think this company is gonna get? Why? What's your 10-year vision for the company? And like, why not this, why not that? What's the worst thing someone who's partnered with you would say about you? And when was the last time you fired someone for underperformance? Why? What will you do if this company runs out of cash? He even asked about our summer plans. Basically, he's like, do you guys work or am I just gonna have to do the work? So the point is, finding somebody like Bobby, cheat code for a business, and you know it's a Bobby because they vet you too. And when this person comes that starts vetting you right back because they have, you know, just as many options as you do, I want you to start doing what I'm doing, which is highlight the Bobby. Every time they do something good and you see the difference, start to say it. In your meetings every single week, we have like a Get Shit Done award winner of the week. that should be highlighting the person who is actually moving the needle. When that happens, then it becomes the norm. Everybody does it. And it's how BizScout managed to go from a napkin sketch to 56,000 listings and 21,000 buyer-broker connections. So Builder's biggest competitive advantage isn't AI. It is actually your humans. So go find your Bobby, realize you got a long runway, and make sure that you know how to spot a Bobby when you see one.
Crew, this is so cool. The podcast is growing like crazy, and it's only actually because of one thing, you. I don't know if you know this, but the only way the Big Deal Pod grows is when you share it with somebody else. We don't do ads. We don't do pay for play. We don't go on other people's podcasts and talk about it. So if you think there was something helpful here, if we made you money, we made you think about your business or life differently, the most beautiful thing you can do for me is share it. And the most beautiful thing you can do for someone that you care about is to share it with them, help them grow alongside you. So please share the pod. That's how we grow. And also tag me on anything you share. I love resharing other builders across Instagram, Twitter, and all other platforms. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're super important.